The Velcra scout ship, Veldis, was stationed near the edge of the galaxy's outer rim, a region often considered a quiet backwater by the Empire. The crew had been monitoring traffic, scanning for any signs of resistance or rogue factions, when a strange signal flickered across their screens. At first, they thought it was a glitch, a distortion in the space-time continuum, but the reading persisted. It was an anomaly, something solid, and bigger than anything the Velcra had encountered. The Velcra command center erupted into chaos as the signal was traced to a location near the galactic border. Captain Elan, a seasoned Velcra officer, immediately ordered a recon mission. His pulse quickened as the data from the scanner continued to flood in. This wasn't a random object. It was a ship, a massive one, larger than anything the Velcra fleet had, yet completely unfamiliar in design. "It's impossible," muttered Kiro, the ship's lead technician. He scrolled through the ship's database, trying to find a match. Nothing. No records, no past encounters. This doesn't exist in any of our archives. The officers around him exchanged uneasy glances. Yilan clenched his fist. His mission had always been to safeguard the borders, ensuring nothing slipped past the Velcra Empire's iron grip. But what if this wasn't just a passing ship or a stranded vessel? What if it was a new threat? A message was sent to the High Command, but the time for waiting had passed. The recon mission needed answers, and quickly. They sent a fleet of smaller scout ships to investigate, but as they neared the coordinates, something strange happened. The ship, a massive warship, hulking and strangely silent, remained stationary in deep space, as if waiting. The smaller Velcra ships circled cautiously, scanning from multiple angles, but there was no sign of life aboard. The readings were erratic, as though the ship was partially dormant, its systems either offline or intentionally masked. Suddenly, a strange pulse rang out from the unknown vessel, a frequency the Velcra had never encountered. It reverberated in the fabric of space itself, sending shockwaves through the scanners. The Velcra ships, now closer than ever, were thrown into disarray by the energy surge. Their systems began to malfunction. Shields flickered, weapons went offline. The communications channels buzzed with static. "What in the stars is that?" shouted Captain Elan, his voice tight with panic. It wasn't just the ship, it was something beyond their understanding. They were facing an unknown force, one that could render their advanced technology useless with a mere pulse. Back on Velcra homeworld, the High Command, including the powerful and calculating Zorith, received the alarming news. The fleet had been disabled by this mysterious ship. Worse still, their scouts reported an additional troubling detail. The ship was heading directly into Velcra-controlled space, and they had no idea why. Zorith stood motionless, his sharp eyes gleaming with a cold intensity. His empire had never encountered a threat like this before, and he couldn't allow the unknown ship to get any closer. He issued an order to mobilize the entire Velcra fleet, signaling an immediate state of readiness. The time for answers was over. The time for action had come. As the Velcra forces raced toward the unknown ship, the human warship, the Triton, cruised silently forward into the heart of enemy territory. Its crew, still unaware of the chaos their presence had sparked, prepared for what was to come. Neither side knew that this unintentional encounter would set in motion a conflict that would forever change the balance of power in the galaxy. The Triton's journey had just begun. Commander Sarah Locke stood at the helm of the Triton, the command center humming quietly around her. The ship, though a marvel of human ingenuity, still felt strange, even alien to her at times. Designed in secrecy, its systems were complex, interwoven with alien technology scavenged from forgotten corners of the galaxy. Locke had always trusted her instincts, but there were moments when even she felt like a visitor aboard her own vessel. "Commander," Lieutenant Evan Moss, the communications officer, called from his station. "We've detected something. A disturbance in the sensor array. It's not a typical gravitational anomaly. Could be a ship." Sarah's brow furrowed. "Is it the Velcra?" Have they caught up to us? Moss hesitated for a moment, eyes scanning the readings. I don't think so. The readings are unusual. It's big, bigger than anything I've seen before, but it's almost like the ship isn't there. At least not in the way we expect. Sarah exhaled, her grip tightening on the command console. The Velcro had been hunting them since they had first left the human enclave, years ago. The Triton was humanity's last hope, a relic of a war long since buried in the history books. They had been on the run for so long, avoiding detection at all costs, and yet now, with no clear plan or direction, they had stumbled across something far worse than they had expected. Send a probe, she ordered. I want eyes on that anomaly. Now. Moments later, a small unmanned scout vessel shot out from the Triton and made its way toward the strange object. The probe's camera feed came alive, transmitting high-resolution images of a colossal structure. The object wasn't just a ship, it was something else entirely. Its outer hull was jagged and angular, unlike anything the crew had ever seen. Pockmarked with strange patterns and swirling energy fields, it seemed to absorb light, creating a haunting aura of darkness. The probe's scanners pinged erratically, as if the object itself was warping space around it. That's not the Velcro, Locke muttered, more to herself than anyone else. What the hell is that? Moss turned to her, anxiety creeping into his voice. Commander, we're too close. We need to make a decision. Fast. It's not responding to our signals. No signs of life either, but... Before he could finish, a loud screech echoed across the bridge, cutting off the communication feed. Static flooded the room as the ship's lights flickered. The crew scrambled to stabilize their systems, but it was clear something was happening. The probe had gotten too close. A soft hum, almost imperceptible at first, reverberated through the hull. The ship began to vibrate violently as the Triton's own systems momentarily flickered to life, then fell into a temporary blackout. The ship groaned under the strain of a force it could neither understand nor control. Sarah slammed her fist on the console. Damage report, she barked. Shields are holding, but we're losing power in the forward arrays, replied Engineer Drace, his face pale as the lights continued to dim. Whatever that thing is, it's interacting with our systems on a deeper level. I'm not sure how long we can last like this. Suddenly, the hum intensified, and the strange ship's exterior pulsed with energy. A faint, high-pitched tone reverberated in the bridge, slowly escalating in pitch and intensity. It was like the ship itself was alive, responding to the Triton's presence. Locke felt a strange sense of dread wash over her as the tone reached its peak. There was something about the ship, its presence, that made her skin crawl. The Triton was made to be a weapon, designed to fight and survive. But this was something entirely beyond her comprehension. And now, she realized, they were on the precipice of something far greater than a mere military engagement. They had unwittingly stumbled upon a power that was ancient, unknowable, and very dangerous. Initiate evasive maneuvers, Locke ordered, her voice cutting through the rising tension. We need to get out of here. Now. But it was too late. The strange ship emitted a pulse so powerful that it rocked the Triton violently, throwing everyone off their feet. The entire command center plunged into darkness. And then, nothing. For a moment, Sarah Locke thought they had been wiped from existence. But as her eyes slowly adjusted, she saw the bridge come back online, one flickering light at a time. Her heart hammered in her chest. They hadn't been destroyed. They hadn't been obliterated. Yet. We're still here, Locke whispered, half in disbelief. But it's gone. The ship, gone. Moss looked at her with wide eyes. Where did it go? That was the question that hung in the air, unanswered. The anomaly was gone, but its presence still loomed like a shadow over the Triton. Something had changed, and Commander Locke knew, in the pit of her stomach, that whatever they had encountered was not done with them. It was just the beginning. Back on Velcro homeworld, The High Command was in a state of full alert. The unexpected appearance of the unknown warship had sent shockwaves through the galaxy's most powerful empire. Zoreth, High Commander of the Velcra, paced the long, cold corridors of the command center. His mind worked through the myriad possibilities with surgical precision, but each thought was laced with doubt. The scouts' reports were troubling. They were certain the Triton wasn't a Velcra design, but the technology on display was beyond anything they had encountered. Why hasn't it responded? Zoreth growled, his voice like gravel scraping against metal. The thought that a foreign power might have slipped past their detection systems was unacceptable. Do we have any communication with them? Any sign of intent? One of his advisors, a sharp-eyed officer named Krell, stepped forward, his face a mask of concern. We tried hailing them, my lord, but the ship is silent. No response. We attempted to scan it, but their systems seem to be blocking our attempts. It's as though they're deliberately keeping us in the dark. Zoreth's mind worked faster than the speed of light, strategizing his next move. His empire had crushed everything in its path for centuries, and now an unknown force, one that had somehow evaded detection, was hovering on the fringes of their domain. It was unacceptable. Prepare for immediate engagement. I want the entire fleet mobilized, he ordered coldly. We cannot allow this ship to reach our core territories. If it is hostile, we will show them why the Velcra are the galaxy's apex. Krell hesitated for a moment, his usual composure cracking. And if it's not hostile? What if it's merely a lost ship, or worse, an abandoned relic? Zoreth's eyes narrowed, his expression hardening. I don't take chances. If it's lost, then it's too dangerous to leave wandering. If it's an abandoned relic, then it is our right to claim it. Regardless, it will be under our control. The decision was made. Velcra warships, dark and imposing, swiftly moved into position, forming a blockade across the sector. At the heart of the fleet was Zoreth's flagship, the Zerathis, a ship of unmatched destructive power. He was no fool. He understood that this unknown warship could be more than a simple threat. It could be the tipping point in the struggle for galactic supremacy. As the Velcra prepared for war, a hidden truth began to emerge, one that had been buried deep in the Empire's darkest archives. The Triton, the warship currently on the move through their space, was not a mere enemy ship. It was humanity's lost legacy. Aboard the Triton, Commander Locke continued her efforts to regain control of the ship. The systems were still reeling from the pulse emitted by the mysterious ship, leaving her with a fractured, unreliable interface. But she had little time to waste. Damage report, Locke demanded, her voice as steely as ever. We've lost several exterior sensors, Drace replied, his hands flying over the console. The pulse interfered with the power grid. We're running at 70% efficiency. Reactors are stable, but the shields are weak. Locke clenched her fists. We can't afford to stay here much longer. The Velcra will find us soon. Moss, sitting at the communications panel, turned to her. Commander, there's something you need to see. On the screen in front of him, a series of rapidly flashing symbols appeared, encrypted signals, intercepted from Velcra communication channels. It was a clear indication. The Velcra knew they were here. They were actively hunting the Triton, and the ships in pursuit were not far off. Locke's heart skipped a beat. She had expected the Velcra to eventually discover their presence, but she hadn't anticipated it happening so quickly. Worse still, their fleet was large, and every ship they deployed would be stronger and faster than anything they had seen in ages. The Triton's unexpected appearance had already triggered an alarming response. But there was something even more unsettling. The Velcra were not merely reacting to an unknown ship. They were responding with a kind of precision reserved for the most dangerous of enemies. They know we're here, Locke muttered, her mind racing. And they know what we are. Drace looked up from his station, his voice low. The Velcra aren't just hunting us. They're hunting humans. Locke's gaze hardened. Then we give them a fight they won't forget. Her orders were swift and resolute. The Triton would not run. Not this time. She would not allow her crew to be hunted, not without giving the Velcro a clear message. "Full power to the forward shields," she commanded. "Activate the offensive systems. We are not hiding from them. We are going to make them regret this." The crew moved into action, their faces hardening as they prepared for the battle to come. But as the Triton began to power up, Locke couldn't shake the feeling that the Velcro's response was more than just a precaution. The Triton's arrival had awakened something deep within the Empire's history, something far darker than any of them could have anticipated. And they were about to learn just how deep that darkness ran. As the Triton drifted silently in the black void of space, the tension aboard the ship reached a boiling point. The crew worked furiously to stabilize systems that had been thrown into disarray by the strange pulse emitted by the mysterious ship. Every console buzzed with static, and the once precise holographic maps flickered erratically. Yet, amid the chaos, something unexpected happened. Something both terrifying and extraordinary. "Commander," Drace called out, his voice strained but clear. "I'm getting an anomaly. It's coming from the central core. The systems seem to be aligning. I can't explain it, but it's like the ship is awakening." Locke finished for him, her eyes narrowing as she crossed the room toward his station. "Tell me exactly what's happening." Drace's fingers flew across the controls, his face bathed in the glow of the screen. "The core's internal energy patterns are changing. It's like it's feeding off the pulse. The Triton is reacting to it, adapting to it. Power output is spiking." Locke's breath caught in her throat. The ship's core had always been a mystery to her, a black box of sorts. Though the Triton was a state-of-the-art warship, designed with humanity's best technology and enhanced by scavenged alien artifacts, the exact nature of the core was classified. Its true potential was a closely guarded secret, even from the ship's crew. But now, as the energy surge continued to build, she understood with sudden clarity. The ship wasn't just reacting. It was awakening. This core, this power source, was far more than they had ever realized. The Triton. "It's not just a warship," Locke muttered under her breath. Her mind raced, grappling with the growing realization that humanity's last hope might be far more than anyone could have imagined. "We need to harness this," Drace said urgently, his eyes wide with the intensity of the moment. "Commander, if we control this power, we could turn the tide. We could even destroy the entire Velcro fleet." Locke's face hardened. As appealing as the idea of wielding such power was, she couldn't afford to let desperation cloud her judgment. The Velcro were not just any enemy. They were relentless, calculated, and cruel. She had seen the devastation they wrought during their previous invasion of Earth, and she wasn't about to repeat the cycle of violence that had nearly wiped humanity from the stars. "Activate the stabilization protocols," Locke ordered firmly. "We're not using this power unless we know what we're dealing with." Trace nodded, but as he keyed in the commands, the ship's vibration intensified. The entire hull groaned under the strain, and the walls seemed to hum with a low, resonant energy. The crew exchanged nervous glances, a collective sense of foreboding settling over them. "The core is resistant to our control," Drace reported, his voice tinged with disbelief. "It's responding to us. Communicating, almost. It's not just a machine." Locke's grip tightened on the nearest console. The implications of this were staggering. If the core was somehow alive, or, at the very least, sentient, what kind of intelligence had they unearthed? What was its true purpose? And why had humanity been entrusted with something so dangerous? The answer, she realized with a shiver, was clear. The ship, the Triton, had been designed not just as a vessel of war, but as a weapon. And weapons, especially one of this scale, didn't just lie dormant. They were waiting for the right moment to unleash their full potential. "Commander." Moss's voice cut through the tension, and Locke turned to find him staring at his communications panel, his face pale. "We've got company." Locke's heart sank. She knew what that meant. The Velcro fleet had arrived. With a final, hesitant glance at the pulsing core, she turned to her crew. Prepare for battle. Whatever this ship is, we're going to need everything it's got. As the Velcro fleet loomed closer, the Triton seemed to respond to the presence of its enemies. The hum grew louder, more insistent. For the first time since their flight from Earth, Locke felt a cold certainty settle in her chest. They weren't just running anymore. They were ready to fight. And the Triton, humanity's last hope, was more than ready to unleash its power. The moment was electric. The Triton hung in space, like an ancient beast waking from a long slumber, its pulse an ominous thrum in the void. Outside, the Velcro fleet had emerged from hyperspace, massive warships gleaming under distant stars. The enemy ships were sleek, built for precision, their weapon systems capable of disintegrating anything in their path. They were calculated, merciless, and most importantly, they'd vastly outnumbered the Triton. But the Triton wasn't just another ship, not anymore. Commander, the fleet is locking onto our coordinates. They're preparing to fire, Moss reported, his eyes glued to his console, where flashing red indicators told a grim story. Locke's jaw tightened. The situation was bleak, but there was something in her eyes, an undeniable fire that her crew knew all too well. She had faced impossible odds before, but this time it was different. The core had spoken, whether through the power surging through the ship's veins or something deeper, an awareness she couldn't explain. She wasn't certain how much of the ship's potential they had unlocked yet, but she was certain of one thing: it wasn't time to cower. Targeting the lead ship, Zarathus, Locke ordered, her voice a calm contrast to the chaos mounting in the room. The Velcro flagship was the heart of the enemy fleet, and taking it out would send a powerful message. "You're sure about this?" Drace asked, his voice tinged with hesitation. "We don't know what the core is capable of. We're pushing the limits." "We don't have time for caution," Locke replied, her voice steely. "We either take the first strike, or we don't survive this." A tense silence filled the bridge, broken only by the hum of the ship's reactor growing louder, more insistent. In the pit of her stomach, Locke felt the unmistakable stirrings of the ship's power. It wasn't just fuel. It was something ancient, something alien, merging with their own technology in a way she didn't fully understand. The Triton shuddered as the main guns powered up, a deep rumble shaking the entire ship. The air on the bridge became charged, as if the very atoms around them were resonating in sync with the ship's core. Drace glanced over at the weapons officer, who gave him a quick nod. The ship's cannons, hidden beneath layers of reinforced armor, aligned with the lead Velcro vessel. "Firing sequence initiated," the weapons officer announced. Locke's hand hovered over the command console, the weight of her decision settling heavily on her. The crew watched in rapt silence, their collective breaths held as they awaited the moment that would define everything. Fire. The Triton's guns erupted in a brilliant flash of energy, the shockwave of the blast reverberating through the hull. For a split second, everything seemed to slow, time itself bending under the force of the attack. A beam of concentrated energy shot through the blackness of space, slicing toward the Zarathus with a speed and ferocity that left no room for evasion. The lead Velcro ship, caught off guard, attempted to deploy its shields, but it was too late. The beam hit its mark, tearing through the hull like paper, sending plumes of fire and metal spiraling into space. The Zarathus shuddered under the impact, its shields flickering before collapsing entirely. A gaping hole opened in its side, exposing the inner workings to the void. The impact was cataclysmic. The Velcro fleet staggered in response, momentarily disoriented. For a brief moment, there was chaos in their ranks, confusion rippling through their command structure. But then, the familiar, cold calculation returned. "Direct hit," Drace said, his voice laced with awe. "But we've done more than just damage it. We've disrupted their fleet's cohesion. They're scattering." Locke's eyes burned with a mixture of satisfaction and grim resolve. This was just the beginning. The first strike had been effective, but she knew that it had also marked them as enemies in the eyes of the Velcro. "We've got their attention now," she muttered, her gaze hardening. "Prepare for their retaliation." Outside, the Velcro fleet began to regroup, though their shock at the Triton's firepower was evident. Small, agile fighters launched from the Velcro warships, darting toward the Triton with precision, weapons blazing. Their sheer numbers were overwhelming, but the Triton wasn't finished yet. Locke turned to her crew, who were already positioning their ship for evasive maneuvers. "Increase power to the thrusters. We can't stay in their line of fire. Let's see if the Velcro can keep up." The Triton surged forward, its engines roaring to life as it barreled toward the heart of the Velcro fleet. Every second counted now. The battle was just beginning, and the outcome would depend not just on raw firepower, but on how well they could outsmart their relentless enemies. As the battle raged around them, Locke's mind never strayed far from one crucial thought. This was no longer just a fight for survival. This was humanity's reckoning, and she wasn't about to let the Triton, or her people, go down without making sure the Velcro would never forget their mistake. The battle unfolded like a storm, fierce and relentless. The Triton danced among the Velcro fleet, its sleek frame cutting through space with a grace that belied its immense firepower. Velcro fighters swarmed like hornets, their weapons firing in precision bursts, but the Triton's evasive maneuvers, enhanced by its alien tech, made it almost impossible to pin down. Yet even with their superior speed and agility, the Velcro were not deterred. They adapted quickly, regrouping in tighter formations, trying to box the Triton in. Locke stood at the helm, her eyes locked on the view ahead, each movement instinctive, as the ship responded to her commands. She could feel the pulsing energy of the core beneath her feet, its power resonating through every part of the ship. The Triton was alive with it now, and as strange as it was, she felt a connection with the vessel, an unspoken bond that went beyond command and control. It was as though the ship itself was growing in strength, its very essence shifting to meet the challenge. "Commander," Drace's voice cut through the tension. "We're taking hits to the outer hull. The Velcro's deploying heavier firepower." "Shields holding," Locke demanded, not taking her eyes off the view screen as the nearest Velcro ship, a destroyer, launched a barrage of plasma blasts. "Shields are down to 30%, but they're still holding," Drace replied, sweat trickling down his brow. "It's only a matter of time before we lose them completely." Locke's grip on the armrest tightened. The Triton was holding its own, but she knew that wouldn't last forever. Every moment they spent engaged with the Velcro was another moment they risked being overwhelmed. Her mind raced, looking for the opening, the chance to turn the tide. She wasn't going to wait for that chance to come. She was going to create it. "Lieutenant Moss," Locke barked, her voice sharp, "reconfigure our forward cannons to target their propulsion systems. We're not just going to fight them, we're going to slow them down." Moss's fingers flew across his station. "Aye, Commander." Recalibrating now. Outside, the Triton moved with a sudden, savage speed. The ship's pulse cannons, once aimed at the heart of the Velcro warships, now locked onto the vulnerable thrusters of the lead destroyer. The Triton fired once more, the beam piercing the darkness like a spear, slamming into the propulsion engines of the destroyer. The Velcro ship bucked violently as its thrusters exploded in a cascade of sparks and fire. It began to drift, disabled, its fleet forced to scatter to avoid the wreckage. Locke allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction, but she knew the victory was temporary. The Velcro would retaliate, and they would retaliate hard. They had no intention of letting a single ship, no matter how powerful, disrupt their plans. As she turned her attention back to the battle, she noticed a change. The Velcro fleet was not regrouping as they had before. Instead, they were pulling back. A retreat. "Why are they falling back?" Locke murmured. "What's happening?" Moss looked up, confusion in his eyes. "It looks like they're forming a new formation, but it's different. They're consolidating their forces around a single point. It's almost as if they're waiting for something. Locke's stomach twisted. A trap. No, this felt different, almost deliberate. The Velcro weren't retreating. They were preparing for something bigger, something they hadn't unleashed yet. All hands, brace for impact. Locke shouted, her voice rising above the hum of the ship's systems. Something's coming. Stay alert. And then it happened. A deep rumble shook the Triton. For a split second, every system on the ship stuttered, throwing the crew off balance. The lights flickered as the core flared with an intense, overwhelming energy. The hum of the ship intensified, a low, almost sentient sound that vibrated through the hull. "Commander, the core is reacting again." Drace's voice came through, strained. "It's amplifying its output. The ship's systems are trying to stabilize. But this is unlike anything we've seen before." Locke's eyes widened in realization. The Triton wasn't just responding to the Velcro. It was reacting to something else, something far more dangerous. On the view screen, the Velcro ships had converged on a central point. At the heart of their formation, a massive object, one that had previously gone unnoticed, began to emerge from the darkness. It was a ship, but not like any ship Locke had ever seen. Its structure was so alien, so vast, that it dwarfed even the Velcro flagship, a true Leviathan. Its surface was covered in strange energy fields, flickering like a storm contained within a shell of dark metal. The ship's core pulsed with an almost rhythmic energy, sending waves of distortion through the surrounding space. "We've never seen anything like this," Moss whispered, his voice barely audible over the hum. Is that their true flagship?" Locke's pulse quickened. "No, that's not just a flagship. It's a weapon." And suddenly, she knew. The Velcro had not been hunting them. They had been waiting for this moment, the moment when the Triton and its power could finally be tested against the might of the Velcro's greatest weapon. The Triton was about to face its ultimate trial. The massive Velcro vessel loomed ahead, its presence alone enough to send a chill through the crew. It was not just a ship. It was a fortress, a weapon designed to bring entire systems to their knees. The energy radiating from its surface distorted the surrounding space, bending light and distorting gravity. As the Triton glided toward it, the ship's sheer scale made even the Velcro fleet seem insignificant. This was the true threat, the heart of their empire's might. "Commander," Drace's voice trembled as he analyzed the incoming ship. "The readings are off the scale. The energy output is beyond anything we've ever encountered. It's almost like it's drawing power from another dimension." Locke's heart raced. She understood. This wasn't just an advanced warship. It was a weapon of mass destruction. A ship capable of altering the very fabric of space, and it was now closing in, its weapon systems primed. "We need to keep moving," Locke said, her voice unwavering despite the mounting pressure. "This ship's firepower alone could obliterate us if we stay in its range too long." Evasive maneuvers, now. The Triton veered sharply to the left, its engines thrumming with intensity as the crew scrambled to keep up with the rapid adjustments. The massive Velcro ship fired, and Locke's breath caught as the beams of concentrated energy lit up the void. The sheer destructive power of the barrage caused a ripple in space, distorting light in its wake. But Locke had already anticipated the move. "Move! Move!" she barked, her hands working the console with precision, urging the ship into a violent roll to avoid the blast. They barely skimmed the edge of the beam, a streak of blinding light that left a scar across the stars. The Triton was faster, no doubt, but the Velcro ship's firepower was unlike anything they had ever seen. It was as if the Triton was being hunted by a force of nature, a predator that knew every move before it was made. "We can't keep this up forever," Drace shouted, his voice tense. "We're burning through power at a rate we can't sustain. The core's output is reaching critical levels." Locke's mind raced. The core, humanity's greatest advantage, was beginning to strain under the pressure. She could feel the ship groaning beneath her, as though the Triton itself was exhausted from the constant struggle. The alien technology, the sentient energy of the core, was pushing them beyond what was safe, but it was also growing in strength, evolving. "We have to turn the tables," Locke muttered, her fingers flying over the control panel. She needed something more, something that could bridge the gap between them and the Velcra's unimaginable firepower. Suddenly, it hit her. The pulse, the strange energy burst they had felt earlier when the Triton had first awoken. What if it was the key? The core was more than just a power source. It was alive, adaptable, and now the crew would have to trust in it to save them. "Trace," Locke said, her tone steely, "I need you to bypass the stabilization protocols. We're going to harness the core's full output, every ounce of power it can give us." "Commander, that's..." Drace began, but Locke cut him off. "If we don't, we'll die here. There's no other option." He hesitated, but he could see the determination in her eyes. With a deep breath, Drace nodded and began rerouting the energy flows, channeling all the power from the core into the ship's weapon systems. The core flared, its hum rising to a near-deafening pitch as it responded to the surge of energy. For a moment, it felt as though the ship might tear itself apart. But then, something clicked. The power stabilized. Outside, the Velcra ship continued to chase them, its energy beams flashing through the darkness. But the Triton wasn't running anymore. It was waiting. "Commander," Moss called, his voice anxious but hopeful. "We've got the weapon systems locked. The power's stable. We're ready to fire on the enemy ship." Locke didn't waste a second. "Fire everything we've got." A torrent of energy erupted from the Triton, streams of destructive force unleashed with a power unlike anything the Velcra had ever seen. The core's energy coursed through the ship, amplifying the weapons far beyond normal capacity. Beams of pure, focused energy lashed out, striking the massive Velcra ship with a violence that made the stars flicker. The Velcra flagship shuddered, its defensive shields flaring to life, but they were no match for the overwhelming force of the Triton's attack. One by one, the shields cracked under the barrage. The flagship's outer structure began to melt, its hull buckling from the strain. But just as the Triton thought it had gained the upper hand, the Velcra ship unleashed its own weapon, an enormous pulse of energy so vast it seemed to consume space itself. The beam rocketed toward the Triton, a force of nature that threatened to erase everything in its path. "Brace for impact," Locke shouted, her heart pounding. She had one chance. With a flick of her wrist, she pushed the Triton into a high-speed roll, narrowly avoiding the direct hit. The pulse grazed their shields, sending a shockwave through the ship, but they held. For now, the battle was far from over. The Velcra had just revealed their true power, and now the Triton would have to find a way to survive. The air on the bridge was thick with tension, crackling with the aftershocks of the devastating near-miss. The Velcra flagship loomed before them, battered but still very much alive. Its weapon had left a deep scar on the Triton's shields, but the ship held firm, its alien core pulsing with new energy, almost as if the battle itself had awakened something primal inside the vessel. Locke's mind raced. The Velcra flagship was unlike anything they had ever faced. The sheer scale of the weapon it had unleashed was enough to annihilate an entire fleet, yet they had survived. But only just. They had one chance to finish this, and it would require every last ounce of strength the Triton could muster. "Damage report," Locke commanded, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "Shields at 17%, hull integrity holding. But we've lost several systems," Drace replied, his face pale with exhaustion. "The core is operating at maximum capacity, but it's unstable. If we push it any further, we risk detonation." Locke's gaze flicked to the readouts, her fingers tapping against the console as she considered their options. They were running out of time, and they had already played their hand with the core's power output. Another hit like that, and they would be nothing but debris. But there was something the Velcro flagship had shown them. An opening. The flagship's weapons were formidable, but they were not invincible. They had learned from their previous encounter, and now it was time to use that knowledge. Lock on to their primary energy conduits, Locke ordered, her eyes narrowing. If we can disable their power grid, we can cripple their weapon systems. Drace, reroute all available power to the targeting system. But the core. Drace began, but Locke interrupted him. Do it, Drace. We don't have a choice. Moss was already working, his fingers a blur across his console. Commander, targeting systems are locked. Ready to fire. Locke's eyes never left the view screen. The Velcro flagship's weapon was recharging, and the distance between them was closing faster than she liked. But she wasn't going to wait for it to fire again. The Triton surged forward, using its speed to close the gap. With a single command, Locke locked the Triton's remaining firepower onto the heart of the Velcro ship, the main energy conduits that powered its shields and weapons. The ship shuddered as it unleashed a concentrated barrage, energy beams tearing through the vacuum of space. The Triton's pulse cannons fired in unison, the powerful bolts of light striking the flagship with pinpoint precision. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, a series of explosions tore through the Velcro ship's hull, sending shockwaves through space. The flagship staggered, its energy fields flickering as the core of its power system began to destabilize. The Triton's beams had found their mark, and now the Velcro flagship was reeling, its massive weapon systems failing as its power grid collapsed. Locke didn't hesitate. She pressed the advantage, guiding the Triton in for the final strike. Finish it, now, she ordered, her voice a razor-sharp command. The Triton surged forward, its engines flaring, and with a final devastating blow, the concentrated energy tore through the Velcro ship's remaining defenses. The explosion that followed was like a supernova in miniature, a wave of destruction rippling outward as the flagship's central core imploded in a brilliant flash. For a moment, there was silence. The massive ship, the heart of the Velcro fleet, was gone. Moss let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. It's over. We did it. But Locke's gaze was still fixed on the void ahead. Though the flagship had been destroyed, the battle was far from won. The Velcro fleet, though momentarily stunned, had begun to regroup. Their formation was already tightening again, their ships closing ranks, preparing for a renewed assault. We're not done yet, Locke muttered. She turned to her crew, her expression hardening. Prepare for the next wave. This isn't over until we've ensured humanity's survival. The Triton had dealt a heavy blow to the Velcro, but they weren't going to give up. Not while they had any fight left. Locke stood tall, her resolve unshaken. They had awakened something ancient within the ship. The power of the core, the alien technology that had made them humanity's last hope, now pulsed with an unstoppable force. Whatever came next, the Triton would face it head-on, and with it, the last hope for humankind would rise.